Personally, I don't think that these officials in Venezuela, who were all handpicked by Maduro, will ultimately comply with the U.S. direction.
CIA Director John Ratcliffe has met Venezuela's interim president Delcy Rodriguez in Caracas on Thursday at President Trump's direction, a U.S. official has said. The meeting also happened on the same day that Trump met opposition leader Maria Corina Machado in Washington, who presented the U.S. president with her Nobel Peace Prize winning medal. Now, Machado said she was confident that the remnants of what she called Venezuela's criminal regime would eventually be dismantled. But how difficult will the coming weeks and months be? Well, Mark Cancian is the former colonel in the U.S. Marines, a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Defense and Security Department. Colonel, thank you so much for giving us your time. Good afternoon.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Has Maria Corina Machado been discarded by the U.S. administration, do you think, as a potential leader of the country?
I don't know if I call her discarded, but she's certainly been bypassed. She had cultivated Trump since he became president. She dedicated her Nobel Prize to him. She supported the snatch of Maduro. But then we had this meeting in the White House. She didn't come away with anything. The administration doubled down on its connection with Rodriguez. The only change is that Trump now has her Nobel Peace Prize.
How do you see the development of the current situation with Venezuela? I mean, Donald Trump said effectively he is in charge. Do you think it's tenable to continue, and how long for?
Well, the administration believes that it can run Venezuela through the rump Maduro regime. And the administration also appears to be focused on stability and oil, not democracy and freedom. Whether they can pull this off is a big question. The oil executives have been very skeptical. Personally, I don't think that these officials in Venezuela, who were all handpicked by Maduro, will ultimately comply with the U.S. direction. But I think it'll take a couple of weeks before that becomes apparent.
Do you think it all hangs on whether or not these oil companies are going to be willing to invest and help get that all-important heavy crude oil that America is after? The Trump administration has been very clear. Do you think that actually the political future of Venezuela very much depends on what these oil giants are going to do?
Well, in the near term, I would say no, because any oil efforts are going to be long term. In the near term, the Trump administration, for example, will be telling the Venezuelans to break their connection with Cuba and its intelligence services, break its connections with Russia, which have been longstanding, several decades, for example, to stop maybe abusing its people. That's going to be a tall order. The oil companies have been skeptical for the most part. What they need is long-term stability, and long-term is decades. They want to know if they put $1 billion into Venezuela today, that 10 years from now, it's not going to be expropriated by some future regime. They want to know that they're going to get a return on their investment. Right now, there isn't that kind of stability. It's going to take quite a while before we get a sense about whether that stability is even possible.
Do you think the people of Venezuela are going to continue accepting the current state of affairs? I mean, there has not been a regime change, as you said. These are very much Maduro's people. How long do you think the people of Venezuela would put up with the current situation?
Well, it's a great question. The regime has been very effective in suppressing dissent. On the other hand, the opposition is clearly very strong. Reportedly, they won 70% of the vote in the last election. The crisis for the Trump administration would be if there were mass demonstrations, something like what we saw in Iran. How would they react? Would they back the government in suppressing them? Would they back the demonstrators in seeking reforms? Eventually, the Trump administration may have to face that decision.
And you mentioned Cuba just earlier on, Colonel. Are you at all worried, perhaps, that the action that we saw in Venezuela may spill over to Cuba? We know that Marco Rubio, particularly with his own connections to the country, has very much got Cuba under the spotlight. Do you expect any moves towards some sort of regime change in Cuba as well from this Trump administration?
The administration has not made any military moves against Cuba, but it has been very clear that it intends to squeeze Cuba economically. Cuba's been very dependent on Venezuelan oil and discounts. If the United States cuts that off, and one presumes that they will, then the Cuban administration is going to have to make some very tough decisions.
I want to get your thoughts briefly before we go, Colonel, about the current situation with Denmark and Greenland. How likely do you think that is the situation that Donald Trump may increase the number of troops that he has on Greenland at the moment? There was a massive reduction. There's still, I think, a couple of hundred troops there. Do you think that this discussion, this idea that Donald Trump is obsessed with owning Greenland, will see an increase in troops on the ground?
I don't expect military operations against Greenland. The United States does have about 1,000 troops remaining in its base on the West Coast Pacific. During the Cold War, there were many, many more troops there. And frankly, the Danes would allow the United States to increase its military forces with the idea of securing the Arctic region. They'd support mining or support mining negotiations. President Trump has been emphatic that he wants to own Denmark. I think in the United States it's very unpopular, and people point out that Denmark is a poor island, and why would we want to take control of an island that's really pretty poor? The thinking is that maybe he is positioning himself for negotiations, maybe for mining concessions.
Do you understand? He claims that it's it's integral. Greenland is integral for the security of the United States. We've heard that if America doesn't own or take control effectively of Greenland, then China or Russia will. Now, it's important to say that neither China nor Russia have shown any remote interest in Greenland. Are you buying what Donald Trump is saying in regards to security, or perhaps a little bit similar to Venezuela? It is about those rare earth minerals that we spoke about last week on our show, but actually it's more to do with minerals than it has to do with security.
Well, there are two questions here. One is Greenland important for U.S. national security? And the answer to that is yes, and it's been that way since the Second World War. During the Second World War, I think it was the British that put some troops there, and the United States then picked up that responsibility during the Cold War. This was part of the barrier against Soviet naval operations. But we don't need to own the island. We maintained a very active military presence during the Cold War when it was securely under Denmark. The mining concessions are clearly important to Trump. He thinks very much in economic terms. So yes, it is important for U.S. national security. No, the United States does not need to own it to achieve what we need for national security, and expect some negotiations about rare earths and other mining.
Colonel, thank you very much for your time. Good to speak to you. That's Colonel Mark Cancian, former colonel in the U.S. Marines and senior advisor with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Defense and Security Department.